Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. Today, we got another more casual video coming at you because an article came to my attention in the wild as I was opening the Googles, and I feel the need to read it here together. I have not read very much of this article. I did start it and then decide that I wanted to react in a little more of an authentic way here. Now, in case you haven't guessed from the title or the thumbnail, we're going to be reading an article titled Trump's EPA Chief Zeldin Gives Keynote Speech at Climate Denying Group's Event. Excuse the F out of me. The head of the Environmental Protection Agency gave a keynote speech at a climate denying group's event. I'm not surprised Lee Zeldin is a climate change denier, but we got to get into this article, and I didn't want to have to read it alone, so we're going to read it together. But before we do, I do want to ask that if you find any value in this video at all, consider giving it a like. If, as we're going through this article, you have some thoughts, please pop them down in the comment section below. I feel like we're all going to need that, and I do legitimately enjoy interacting with thoughtful and sometimes not so thoughtful comments. And if you want to see more of me and my content recommended to you, consider clicking that subscribe button. That would be really cool of you, and I'd really appreciate that. But without further ado, I guess let's dig into this. If you want to follow along, I have linked this article below, but I will be popping it up on screen like I have done with the last few. So let's start with the title, headline, whatever you want to call it again, because that's a holy shit kind of headline to me. Trump's EPA chief Zeldin gives keynote speech at climate denying group's event. This article is from Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. So at time of recording, it's currently Tuesday, April 14th. So this article is already about a week old, but let's get into this because it's still important. Lee Zeldin, the administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, gave the keynote speech at a conference on Wednesday morning, one which was hosted by a prominent climate denying think tank that previously compared those concerned about the climate crisis to the Unabomber on billboard posters in 2012. Holy crap! That is a pretty aggressive comparison to make. Let's move on a little bit because I am honestly a little bit speechless. But yeah, let's continue. No longer are we going to rely on bad, flawed assumptions instead of accurate present day facts without apology or regret, Zeldin said at the Heartland Institute's conference on climate change in Washington, D.C. Zeldin has been widely criticized by climate experts. Last month, more than 160 environmental and public health organizations called for him to resign or be fired, saying no EPA administrator in history has so brazenly betrayed the agency's core mission. Yeah, I agree. He should be fired. He should resign. It- Climate change deniers have no business being the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. And his quote talking about flawed assumptions and present day facts, climate science is not flawed assumptions. It's a whole freaking field of science. Just because you don't understand it or it's inconvenient for the fossil fuel industry that has lined your pockets and funded your campaigns does not mean that it's flawed assumptions or it's not real. Whew, I'm getting heated already. Let's go ahead and continue on though. In his speech, Zeldin poked fun at the media for calling him controversial for not following blind obedience to whatever the dire doom and gloom position of the day is from John Kerry or Al Gore or AOC, referring to the Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. It's controversial that we don't sign up for the script that the world is imminently about to end, he said. He derided previous administrations' heeding of climate scientists' warnings about the dangers of greenhouse gas emissions and for ignoring What's good and necessary about carbon dioxide for the life of the planet? Lee Zeldin is just dangerous. Uh, I'm saying that with my full chest here, based on these quotes. He is dangerous. Like I said, climate science is not just a bunch of gobbledygook, it is a field of research. And just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not true. But let's continue. Actually, no. Let's continue to pause here because he is controversial, and it's not that he's following blind obedient or not following blind obedience to dire doom and gloom position, whatever. He's following blind obedience to the fossil fuel industry by denying the science that's out there and by acting in this way. And I presume he wouldn't be in his position if he weren't. But I digress. Let's continue for realsies this time. What happened for years and decades in this country is that the elite, the ruling class, the people who would run the agencies, the people who have decided that they are in charge of the science, the politicians, the biggest grifters, there would be a cabal that would decide exactly which model is the chosen model, which methodology is the higher methodology, he said. And if all of you in this room, if any of you in this room dare to challenge any of that, well, shame on you. That is a pretty big quote that is full of buzzwords there. And uh, it, it makes me mad because it's easy to prey on people that already don't trust academia, especially if you use buzzwords and phrases. I'm referring to cabal, ruling class, elite. And honestly, if you want to look at the very wealthy, the ruling class in this country, many of them are pro fossil fuel. And it's very inconvenient to them that people give a shit about the environment and climate change. But I digress. Let's continue on. Ahead of Zeldin's Wednesday morning speech at the Heartland Conference, Environmental Defense Fund Action put up posters around Hotel Washington critiquing the EPA administrator's participation and saying climate denial does not improve American lives. Lee Zeldin is executive on the playbook of denial written by the Heartland Institute, Joanna Slanley, a vice president of the Environmental Defense Fund, said. The Heartland Institute has accepted money from big oil companies, including Shell and ExxonMobil, and from the Mercers, a family of Republican mega donors. The think tank was contributor to Project 2025, the far right policy blueprint for Trump's second administration. That's absolutely unsurprising. The Heartland Institute rejects the scientific consensus that the climate crisis is real, human caused, and urgent. Since the early 2000s, it has been a leading promoter of climate doubt, even branding climate science as fake news. That's actually really interesting, since we all know that Trump likes to say fake news. I wonder if that's one of the places that he's gotten it. Ugh. Let's continue on. How much longer is this article? Because I not much longer. As you can tell, I am getting mad, and I think it's understandably so because I am a self-proclaimed tree hugger. Uh, I guess modern day hippie, but not as crunchy. I don't know, man. Like, just stuff like this does make me angry because it frustrates me that we have these people who are in positions that they have no business being in because they are denying science and actively pushing harmful messages and ideology. But let's continue on with the article and we'll see how many more times I have to break in before we get to the end. Experts agree that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are warming the planet, resulting in dangerous increases in temperatures and in the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. Scientists have long warned that the world must quickly phase out fossil fuels in order to preserve a livable climate. Yeah, it's really not that hard to understand if you take the time to learn, but many people don't take the time to learn. And I know that I'm probably coming off as a little condescending here. I really don't mean to, because I do understand that there are a lot of people that come from situations where they don't have the privilege of being allowed to take the time to learn. But I'm frustrated here, especially when we have basically climate change denial being presented as official policy, because this is the head of the EPA giving this keynote address. And even though he's not the orange man, it is at least implied that the orange man supports this take as well, because he's the one that the orange man picked to be in the position that he is in. But let's continue on. Donald Trump has repeatedly dismissed the climate crisis as a hoax and dismissed environmental policies as a scam. Under Zeldin, the EPA has exempted polluting facilities from regulations, shuttered climate and environmental research offices, and shrunk its workforce. It has also rolled back dozens of environmental and climate protections. What we are doing in the last 14 months is no surprise, Zeldin said in his speech. It is what I pledged during my confirmation hearing, and it is what the American public voted for when they put Donald J. Trump back in office. And thank God they did. The EPA administrator also spoke about his most controversial environmental rollback, the shredding of the legal finding underpinning virtually all U.S. climate regulations, known as the endangerment finding. Scientists and other experts widely condemned the repeal, but the Heartland Institute has celebrated it. Carbon dioxide, which is required for life on Earth and happens to result from every single bit of human and animal activity on the planet, is not a pollutant and never was, Anthony Watts, a senior fellow at the think tank, said in a February statement praising the repeal. Just because carbon dioxide is necessary for life, if you look at photosynthesis and cellular respiration and all of that, it does not mean that it cannot be harmful as well. Yes, it is needed for plant life and algae and all of the things that photosynthesize, but we are producing it at a rate that the natural ways to scrub it from the atmosphere simply cannot keep up. Too much water can kill you, by the way. So, I just, this is one of those things that really frustrates me because it simplifies a complex situation and removes all nuance. I have recently had a conversation with one of my friends over on TikTok about nuance, and one of the things that I've noticed in social media is that we react to things very quickly. And yeah, you see me reacting here very quickly. That's part of the point of this video. But there is nuance, and that is one of the things that gets lost, especially in back and forths or these quick knee jerk reactions. But we are seeing a case here where nuance is being intentionally ignored. And that is a problem. And I think that one of the things that comes out of the side of climate change denial, the right wing, all of that, is that they prep and prime people to ignore nuance. And that is a problem. But let's continue on with this article. There's really not much left. Maybe I can even get through the whole thing without stopping again, but we shall see. References to the rollback were met with cheers at the conference in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday morning, and Zeldin expressed admiration for the Heartland Institute's advocacy against the endangerment finding in his speech. Craig Rucker, the president of CFACT, a right-wing group which complains about climate exaggeration, introduced Zeldin at the conference as a friend of sound science and a climate realism, a real rock star. I have to pause. I'm sorry. Zeldin is not a friend of sound science. He is a denier of sound science. If the majority of the scientific community is telling you that what you're saying is wrong or harmful, then maybe, just maybe, what you're saying is wrong or harmful. I don't know. Let's continue. Another panel at Wednesday's conference convened the authors of a contentious Department of Energy report that was written to back up the repeal of the endangerment finding. The publication was derided by climate scientists as making a mockery of science and was not used in the justification for the final repeal of the finding. While the world warmed, a lot of things improved and got better and continues to do so, said Ross McKittrick, an author of the report at the conference. Cite your fucking sources, please. Another report author, Judith Curry, a climatologist who rails against climate alarmism, criticized the monolithic consensus on climate science that is presented to the world. Though the US government disbanded the group which produced the controversial report on the endangerment finding, Curry said the authors were currently reviewing comments on the report and preparing new versions to release this year. Earlier on Wednesday morning, the Heartland Institute's president, James Taylor, kicked off the conference with a rousing speech in which he invoked the debunked climate myth that increased carbon emissions are good for plants. Restoring CO2 and restoring warmth to our world is a restoration to more ideal conditions. The truth is clear. There is no climate crisis, said Taylor. The science is very clear. First of all, before I get into all the things that I would like to say here, I would like to point out that yes, they had scientists on that panel. And yes, there are scientists that do disagree with the scientific consensus. And this is one of the reasons why you should not just blindly listen to what someone says. You should always check sources. And if they can't back up what they're saying with reliable source material, then you should take anything they say with a massive heaping spoonful of salt. Now, I do tend to put more trust in the word of scientists. However, if you see one that is not really agreeing with the scientific consensus, you need to ask why. And you need to start looking into it. But never just blindly trust somebody because they have a title or they are in a position of authority. I've said it in my videos, don't just take my word for things, go check my sources. Obviously, in this video, our source is the article we just read, but there is a lot of misinformation being spread by the people quoted in this article, and I do appreciate that the author of this article did point out that it is a debunked claim that more CO2 and warming is good for plant life, especially as someone who does have a background studying plants, who is an arborist, who is working on going back to school to continue studying forestry and wildfire management and things like that, because it is a complete misunderstanding that warmer temperatures and more CO2 is automatically good for plants, because plants are sensitive and they do need specific, uh, they have specific needs, just like you or I do. I'm sorry that I'm not being super organized right now. This is just a casual video, but I the main point here is that Lee Zeldin should not be head of the EPA. He has no business being in that position, and this entire climate denial conference is alarming and laughable. But they do spread a lot of misinformation and a lot of mistrust in science and scientific consensus and the world of academia, which is not really surprising because there is a big disconnect between the world of academia and the general population. And I do think that that is a massive problem that needs to be fixed. And I think part of fixing that is for people who, like me and other science communicators or people attempting to be science communicators, to actually talk about the science in ways that people understand. I also think that another thing that would be helpful would be to make a lot of research more open access so just anybody could look at it. And yeah, you may not understand what you're looking at because scientific writing is really dry because it is for other scientists in that field. We've recently talked about some stuff where I did mention an article that, yeah, when I looked through it, I couldn't make a whole lot of sense of some of it because that's not my field, and that's okay. but it is the job of people who are science communicators to then break that down into digestible chunks. But that's a soapbox I should probably get off of because it's a bit of a tangent right now. It just, our people who are in charge of agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency have no business rallying against the scientific consensus. And this whole administration is a fucking joke, especially when it comes to climate, science, environment, human rights, just everything. It's a fucking joke. I I know that I'm being kind of spicy in this one, and I'm at a point where I don't want to edit myself too much, at least for casual videos like this, because we need people talking about things, we need people making noise, and I don't know how else to make myself clear now. I'm glad that I didn't have to read this article alone. Um, if you have thoughts, put them down in the comments. I certainly have had thoughts, and honestly, I am at a little bit of a loss for words, believe it or not, because this whole thing is just bananas to me. Just a big what the fuck kind of thing. And I know that I'm using a lot of potty mouth, but I think this situation is justifiable. But if you found any value here, go ahead and give this video a like or at least consider it. And if you want to see more of me and my content, some of it's spicy like this, sometimes it's a little more low key and a little more organized, I pinky promise. Consider clicking that subscribe button. I would actually really appreciate it. And no matter what you decide to do, I do hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, what have you, and I will see you all in the next one.